Richard began his research into character and character development in 2013 when he was posted as a package master for leadership and ethics at the Royal Military College of Duntroon. Since then, he has completed his master's degree on the topic and continues to engage publicly on the matter. His work, A Journey to Better the Character of Army Leaders, 2017, is published on the Cove and has been referenced in multiple academic endeavours, both in Australia and internationally. He has since developed a character development tool based on his research, which is an individual guide for self-reflection and character development tailored for use within the Army. He has presented these concepts at the Defence Entrepreneurs Conference in 2017, as well as to the Chief of Army's Futures Day on the same year. Today, Richard will be exploring some of the concepts of character as they pertain to leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Richard to the stage.
Well, good morning, ladies and gents, and thank you very much for having me here today. I can't begin to describe how much it is to be an honour to be here today amongst you all to talk about things that are very near and dear to me, and that's character and its development. What I'd like to speak about today is this tool that's over here, the character development tool, which is fairly self-explanatory. It's a tool that's going to help us within the Army develop our character, and it's ready to roll out within Army as of now. It is a fire and forget tool. You can give it to your young lieutenants, you can give it to your section commanders, and it will guide them through a process to develop their character. However, you can also apply it as a coach, as a mentor, and as a leader to really get at developing and mentoring those individuals to develop their character as well. What it requires the individual to do is to look at this word character and define it for themselves. It requires them to break their character down and put it across a scale that they may never have seen their character before. It then guides the person through how to do self-reflection and analysis on what they have now defined as their character. And then most importantly, it then takes that analysis and assists them in goal setting for the future for how they're going to better their character. It's a very simple system. But that's about half of the book. The second half of the book is then about 360-degree reporting. It's about handing that book off to someone else, and there's room for three people, and I like to think a superior, a subordinate, and a peer, and get them to also analyse your character across the same timescale, across the same metric, and also provide their feedback on what they think about your character. And then the contrasting of their feedback, superior, subordinate, peer, as well as your own feedback over the same timescale, going through filters of self-analysis, and then again, goal setting. I think this is at least a way to start developing character within the Army. And that's what I want to talk about today. So today I would like to explore this concept of character with you all and explore some of the background that's gone into this booklet that I've got on the stage here. Now, some of it is based on the research that I've done, but a lot of it is just based on a passion I have for this concept of character. But essentially, what I'd like to do within the Army is change our relationship with this word character. I believe that we need to start thinking about character as an Army beyond how the psychs talk about character. We need to take character back from the padres and again transcend how they deal with character. We as leaders need to own character. And I think to own character, we need to speak about it in a manner that is measurable, that is tangible, and that is objective. And I think once we can have a concept of character that's tangible, measurable, and objective, we can start developing character and make our leaders a little bit more better. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the first question is, what is character? And it's a very fascinating question. You know, a lot of stuff that was brought up yesterday, is your character your EQ? Is your character your behavior? Is it your personality? Is it your traits? Is it your consciousness? Is it your subconsciousness? Is it your morals? Is it your ethics? It's a very interesting question. And in fact, it's a question that I would like to pose to you a little later on. But what's more interesting is the question is, what is our relationship with character? It's getting a bit excited. What is our relationship with character within the Army? And I think this is a much more fundamental question. For us, for you and me, character is a very familiar term. You know, it's a very visceral term, if you will. You can see someone displaying really good character and you can almost sense it, right, when it's happening in front of you. And same, when someone is displaying bad character, you can almost sense it and feel that bad character is being displayed in front of you now. So we are familiar with this word character. However, we do not have an agreed definition of what character actually is. We can't write it down and have an agreement across the organisation of what we would define as character. And in fact, if I was to ask you all now to define character for yourself and for me right now, what I'd most likely have is 100 different variations of what this word character means. Most likely, a lot of them would be vague. Most likely, a lot of them would be very conceptual as a process as we apply to leadership. And in fact, what I'd like to do now is ask you to do that. I would like you, throughout this presentation, to pick up that Slido application and define what you think character is, for the sake of benchmarking where we're at this point in time with character. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there's something incredibly powerful about having a whole heap of definitions of character. I think it generates creativity, and I think it forces us to look at this concept that is very vague in the past in a little bit more sort of a controlled manner. However, I do think that there is a problem with not having a benchmark definition if we accept the fact that good leadership is underpinned by good character. If we truly believe that the foundation of leadership is character, then I think if we need to benchmark that definition of character in order to develop it, in order to better it, and in order for it to be one of the key foundational components that builds good leadership. And this is what I would like to offer today. So, what you'll probably do after this presentation is you're going to Google what's the definition of character just to prove me wrong. And I know that's what people are doing right now. And what you will find on Google is an immense amount of definitions of character. Now, I will put to you that a lot of these definitions are very vague and they're very conceptual in their nature, and so is the concept of character. And the word esoteric doesn't get used often in a positive format, but I truly believe that we in Army need an esoteric definition of character that's relevant for us, that's different from how the police see it, that's different from how different civilian organisations see it, because we're different from them, and we need different character to what they need within their parts of society. So you will see other definitions out there within the dictionaries. Now, there are some esoteric definitions that exist within the literature if you were to explore it. And I'm going to give you two very extreme examples now, okay? The first one are the psychologists. Now, I know there's a lot of psychs in the room. I'm going to summarise your entire academic background on one of these pink cards. So please don't slay me on Slido. I'm just generalising here, okay? But for the psychs, when we're talking about character, the psychologists are very much interested in your behaviour, and your behaviour that's rooted in your upbringing, your childhood, and the surroundings that were in a part of you as you grew up. And once you reach adulthood and once you join the Army, your behaviours are almost concrete. They're inmalleable. They're something that you have brought to the Defence Force with you, and that's why we have psych screenings before we join. For the psychologists, when we talk about character, it's a concept that is not malleable. You are who you are, okay, is a great statement that summarises, in general, again, don't slay me, psychs, how psychs see character. And I think, it's a great perception to have on it. So for the psychs, it's all about your behaviour. Now, if we go to the other extreme of defining character, we have the philosophers, okay? Now, the philosophers would see character in a slightly different format. For the philosophers, it's about you, but it's about you and your environment. It's about your surroundings. It's about your experiences. It's about your place in the world. And in fact, it's about your worldview, which is a term that's commonly used now. Based off where you are in the world and how you see the world is based on essentially how your character will be moulded to meet this. So for the philosophers, your character is incredibly malleable. It's something that can be changed, and it's something that changes often. You are a product of your environment, again, is a neat little saying that summarises how the philosophers see your character. And I think it's worthy taking forward. So clearly what we have is a tension. There's a tension here between these two extremes. Is your character malleable or is your character unmalleable? The character that you had before Army versus the character now is the same or is not the same? Same. It's the tension between the art and the science. Is it something that we control or something that's uncontrollable? Are leaders born or are they made? It's a common debate that we have and will continue to have for a very long time. So again, I put to you, who's right? Is it the psychs or is it the philosophers? And what I'm going to do is take the easy option. I'm going to say, I think they're both right. All right, I'm going to jump up on the fence and I'm going to say, I think both the philosophers and both the psychs have exceptionally valid points, and I think they're both right. And I think we within Army need a definition that takes both of these perspectives into account to truly accept what character is going forward. And I'd like to highlight this in an example utilising you. So I want you now to think back about when you first joined the Army. In fact, the day before you joined the Army, okay? And I want you to think about you, your personality, your behaviour, what made you laugh, what made you cry, things you might have been afraid of, things that you were proud of. And then I want you to think about yourself now while sitting here in this auditorium. When you contrast these two things together, what you'll find is that you're probably the same person you were the day that you joined the Army, regardless of the time served in between. Okay, you probably have friends from high school that are just like, oh, Rich, you were funny back then, you're funny now. You laugh back then, you laugh now, very much the same way. You're pretty much the same kind of person. And in that way, some of your behaviors have never changed. But in many other ways, I think you'd find it very hard to believe if I was to say to you, you are the exact same person you were the day before you joined the army to the day you are now. Why? Because you've had experiences, you've had education, you've been molded into a certain way to think differently and to see the world differently. Your experience and your surroundings have changed. So in many ways, you are the same person that joined the army all those years ago, but in many other ways, you are a completely different person who joined the army many years ago. And for that reason, I think when we talk about this tension, I think both the psychs and the philosophers are right. And I think it's a good generalization to start us off with the definition of what character is as it pertains to people and people in the army. So I propose to you that this is a first half of a definition of character. Character is the predispositions of a person combined with aspects of the personality forged through experience and education. You can see the coming together of the two concepts here, the stuff that you bring to the army and the stuff that attracted you to the army and the stuff that army was attracted to you by is the stuff that we want you to keep. There's predispositions that you can't change that are a part of you as a human, but there are things that you've learned. There's things that you've experienced. There are things that you've gained whilst being in the army that are also now a part of your character as well. And the combination of these two things is what we would define as character. Okay, so it's fairly straightforward, and I think most people can sort of be familiar with some of these concepts. Now, I think that if we want to have a true working definition of character, we need to have a second half of that definition. And the second half relates to what does army want from character? Now, this is a very important point, I think, to touch off on, and this is what makes this definition of character relevant to army. It has to be a definition that is relevant for army, and army needs to get something from this because essentially we want better leader in armies, and to be better leaders, we need to have better character. So what I would propose that army wants from good character is good leadership. So in essence, we need to relate somehow this definition of character to leadership. So we need to have a second half of the definition, and in many ways, this is probably the easiest part of coming up with a definition through the research. Army wants its leaders with good character to be able to adapt to their environment, and then within this environment, to think, judge, and decide within. It's very, very straightforward. It makes sense that we want people to adapt to their environment in a way that's appropriate to the situation and their surrounding, and we want leaders to think, judge, and decide within that environment. So I propose that this is a second half of a definition of character based on the first half introducing it. So when you put everything together, character is the predispositions of a person. It's what you brought to army, but it's combined with aspects of your personality that have been forged through experience and education. It's what brought you here into this auditorium now. But it's personified in your adaptational reactions to your environment and your ability to think, judge, and decide within. And I put to you that prior to this conversation, we haven't had an agreed definition of character. And I think the definition that's on the board right now is not perfect, okay? But I think it's a start point. And we can now start having a conversation about character that's objective, okay, that's tangible. But I beg to question now, do we have a definition of character that's measurable? And that's going to be the next part of the topic that I'd like to speak about now. So measuring character. If you were to start your journey in measuring character, you would be very confused with the literature that's out there, much the same as trying to define character. And I think, much like we spoke about yesterday, measuring leadership, how could you possibly measure something that's so conceptual and so personal? You can see it being displayed. Dan Kieran yesterday shared an amazing experience about his exploits all around the world. How can you say, oh, Dan, that's a 9 out of 10? You know what I mean? It's a very hard thing to quantify in that circumstance. So it's a very hard thing to measure. What number do you use is probably the first sort of question that I would ask. And how do you stop someone's personal bias interfering with how you measure character or indeed measure leadership? I put it to you that within our PAR system at the moment, we measure certain aspects of character below, at, or above 1 rank. But again, this is what I think of you. It doesn't get much more subjective than that. I think you're displaying this certain type of behavior. It's a personal bias has to come into play. So when we talk about measuring character, I think the question that we need to ask is, why do we want to measure character? For what purpose are we trying to measure character? And when you go through the literature, there is a litany of different ways to measure character, all for a specific purpose. And I think we need a specific purpose within Army. And I think the answer to the question of why we want to measure character is so we can build character. And if it is as selfless as measuring character to building character, then the word measuring is no longer what we need. we need to be aware, and we need to be more character aware and aware of our character, and that is the way we can start developing it. So that's what I propose for the second half, is that we need to be more aware of our character. Now, how you become aware of character has been touched off dozens of times during this seminar thus far. Self-awareness is an incredible tool to understand exactly what your character is, but we need to define it first, and we've spoken about that. And secondly, getting that 360-degree feedback is how you're going to be more aware of what it is your character is. Okay, so when you apply those two things together, I believe we're now having a conversation about being aware of what your character is through self-reflection and through 360-degree reporting. So that's essentially the background. That's the background of what put together the tool that's in front of you now, the character development tool, and sort of the academics that went into how it's sort of been formulated. I'm going to break down the tool for you now to explain it, and then we'll talk about how to potentially implement it. The tool is about changing our relationship with character. The tool is about transcending character beyond the psychs, beyond the padres, beyond the niche sort of specialists that sort of have the academic research into it, and give character back to commanders as a responsibility for them to develop their leaders below them. Platoon commanders, section commanders, group commanders, commanders at every level could benefit from having an honest conversation about character and trying to develop it. It's a small booklet. It's super cheap, okay? You can print out thousands of them, chuck in the back of your pack, and take it out to Talisman Sabre with you next time you go outfield. It's meant to be an organic experience that really makes you break down character. And we'll go through how it does that now. So the first part about the character development tool is understanding what your character is. What it requires you to do is to choose a time frame that you would like to do self-analysis or self-awareness of your character. Now, that time frame can vary. It can be this presentation, it can be this seminar, it can be a PT session, it can be a posting cycle, it could be an exercise, it could be an RMC class, could be an entire span of your current rank, or it could be your entire career. It doesn't matter. The time frame is up to you and where you want to analyze your character through. You then take your character and it guides you through breaking down your character over 41 character items. Now, these have been items that have been researched through surveys and through the literature to give you a different perspective on your character. My favorite time of running these is when I get the big alpha special forces or rugby guys that we spoke about before. I break the character down and we talk about how much appreciation of beauty they have or how much spiritual appreciation they have. They're like, whoa, Triple T, what are you doing? Are we going to hug next? Well, I don't want to break down my character that way. And I'm like, but you've never done it before. Why not break your character down in a way you've never seen before? Because what I'm offering you is 41 different perspectives on your character, which you currently only have one. So it's about breaking those perspectives down. You then are guided through the booklet to graph your character along what we're calling the character awareness graph, and it's completely subjective. Over that time frame, you analyze, how often did I display integrity? How often did I display courage? How often did I display leadership? And then you connect those dots with a line and you've created a graph. Now, quite clearly, that's not mathematical, right? You don't have to have an arts degree from ADFA like I did, no big deal, to know that that's not going to cut it in the maths realm. But it's not meant to be, okay? Because as we said, it's all about awareness. It's not about measurement. And what we're doing is just trying to create some sort of impetus for analysis, something that looks different to how you might have looked at your character before, and hopefully a way that you've never seen your character before, which is on a graph. And that's the first step of the character awareness graph, breaking your character down over a selected time period and creating the character awareness graph. Step number one. Now, step number two is doing self-reflection. Now, the book guides you through self-reflection, utilizing the self-reflection tools that are available to us within Army. And people should be familiar with that filtering system through the leadership PAM. It's been tailored slightly to meet the needs of character development. What traits represent my assets? What traits do I not display regularly? What traits can I focus on to make me a better leader? What traits what can I do to better display these traits, and when am I going to do it? So it guides you through a self-reflection process based off the analysis and the character awareness graph that you've just made to really deep dive some of those topics that you might not have done before. And as I said before, a fire and forget book that guides you through, or you can have a mentor and coach that talks you through this process if they invest the time in your character development. So that's the second step, the self-awareness and the self-reflection. And then the final step is very straightforward. Based off your character awareness graph, based off your self-reflection analysis, you then set goals using the SMART goal-setting format. You set goals that are specific, that are measurable, that are attainable, that are relevant, and then bound by time, and then you've completed, essentially, a session in character development, okay? So that's essentially how the book works. You can fire and forget it. You can just yell at your section commanders, go improve your character, read the book, it'll explain it all. It's designed to be for anyone, at anywhere, at any time. But as I said before, that's just the first half of the book. And what we're trying to introduce into the book is a concept of 360-degree reporting to also better your character. The second half of the book is where you get the impetus or input from other people as well. So you seal your part of the book up, you then hand it over to someone else, and I said there's room for 3 other people in there, superior, a peer, or subordinate, and you ask them, hey, Jimmy, for that PT session that we just did, where I worked really hard, can you just go through this and tell me what you think about me and fill out this character awareness graph for me? They don't see what you've rated yourself, they just see a blank graph. They go through over the same period and assess how they think you have displayed these different character traits. You then seal that part of the book up, give it to someone else. They go through the same process, seal it up, give it to another person. And what you have is your character over one time frame with 4 different perspectives on it, from 4 different people over 41 different character items. This is providing you a great sort of perception of your character over different ways that you may never have seen your character before. You're then guided through this process of self-analysis, slightly changed for receiving other people's opinions, and then you go through the SMART goal setting again. And that, in essence, is the entire character development process through the character development tool, inclusive of 360-degree reporting as well, okay? And so that is essentially it, ladies and gentlemen, for a concept of character, the starter discussion of character, and the character development tool. I'd like to finish the way I started and just say to you that character is a very interesting word. It's a very hard word to define, and I've offered a definition today that I hope is debated. I hope people agree with it. I actually hope more people don't agree with it, because once we start having these arguments, now we're starting to have a real conversation about what is character. I think another question we need to ask ourselves is who owns character? Because at the moment, I think no one does, and I think someone needs to own it. My personal opinion, we as leaders need to own our own character and the character of those that are underneath us as well. And most importantly, I think hopefully you understand now that if we want to get real about character, well, then we need to talk about character in a way that's tangible. We need to talk about it in a way that's measurable for self-awareness. And we need to talk about a way of character that is objective. Not just what I think, not just what you think, but a way that we think as an organization is a way forward for character. The character development tool is ready to roll out. I'll offer it to you, and thank you very much for your time today.